I trusted her with everything I owned. I bought that house for us. She kissed me and said, "Yes, I want a quiet life." A week later, it was gone. I was homeless in a country I barely understood, and she stopped answering my calls. If our stories resonate with you, don't forget to like, comment, and tell us where you're watching from. This story was shared with us by one of our viewers. My name is Everett, and I'm 61 years old. I come from Toledo, Ohio, where I spent 37 years fixing cars and watching my marriage slowly fall apart. When the divorce papers were finally signed, I looked around my empty garage and realized I had nothing left to keep me there. My ex-wife got the house, my kids were grown and scattered across the country, and I was tired of Ohio winters that seemed to last forever. That's when I decided to do something I'd never done before. I decided to start over completely. I'd heard stories from other guys online about retiring in the Philippines. Cheap cost of living, warm weather year-round, and maybe, just maybe, a chance to find someone who'd appreciate a simple man with simple dreams. I wasn't looking for anything complicated. I just wanted peace, a small house with a view, and someone to share coffee with in the mornings. After 37 years of getting my hands dirty and coming home to silence, that sounded like paradise. I landed in Manila in March of 2023 with 2 suitcases and about $40,000 in savings, everything I owned in the world. The plan was to rent for a few months, get my bearings, and then maybe buy a small place somewhere quiet. I stayed in Clark for the first few weeks because it felt familiar. Lots of Americans, English everywhere, and decent coffee shops where I could sit and figure out my next move. That's where I met Jonalyn. She was working at a coffee shop near the main strip, and something about her smile caught my attention. She wasn't trying too hard like some of the other girls I'd noticed. She just seemed genuine. When she brought my order over, she said, "You look kind. Are you new here?" In this soft voice that made me feel like I mattered for the first time in months. We talked for maybe 10 minutes before her manager called her back to work, but she wrote her number on a napkin and slipped it under my cup. "Maybe you can show me around sometime," I said, trying not to sound desperate. "I'd like that," she replied, and I believed her. We had lunch the next day at a small Filipino restaurant where she insisted on ordering for both of us. She told me she was 26, originally from Tarlac City, but had been working in Clark for 2 years to help support her family. She spoke about her mother with such love, about how hard her father worked in the rice fields, and how she dreamed of a simpler life away from the noise and pressure of the city. "I'm tired of this place," she said, looking around the busy restaurant. "Too many people, too much stress. I think about moving back to the province sometimes, but there's no work there." "What would you do if you could live anywhere?" I asked. She smiled and stirred her soup slowly. "I'd want a small house with a garden, maybe some chickens. Somewhere quiet where I could help my family but still have peace. Just simple living, you know?" My heart jumped. This was exactly what I'd been dreaming about. Here was a woman who wanted the same thing I did, a quiet life, away from all the noise and complications. We spent the rest of that afternoon talking about everything. She asked me about Ohio, about my work, about why I'd left everything behind. When I told her about the divorce, about feeling invisible in my own life, she reached across the table and touched my hand. "You're not invisible to me," she said. "I see you." Within a month, we were spending every day together. She'd finish her shift at the coffee shop and we'd walk around Clark talking about our future. I started thinking about her constantly. When she wasn't with me, I felt lonely in a way I hadn't experienced since I was a teenager. She had this way of making me feel important, like my dreams mattered, like I was worth listening to. One evening, as we sat outside a small bar watching the sunset, I told her about my real plan. "I want to buy a house in the province," I said. "Somewhere with land, maybe near the mountains. I've got enough saved up to buy something nice, and I want to live simply. Garden, maybe raise some animals. Just peace and quiet." Her eyes lit up in a way I'd never seen before. "Really? You'd do that?" "I would. I want to. But I don't want to do it alone." She was quiet for a long moment, and I started to worry I'd moved too fast. Then she turned to me and said, "That sounds perfect. That's all I want too, Everett. A quiet life with someone who understands. Would you want to do that with me? Move to the province, I mean?" She smiled and kissed my cheek. "Yes, I want that more than anything." That night, lying in my hotel room, I felt happier than I had in years. I'd found her. I'd found someone who wanted the same simple life I'd been dreaming about. Someone who saw value in what I had to offer, who didn't need fancy restaurants or expensive gifts. Just a man who wanted to love her and build something real together. Over the next few weeks, we started looking at properties online. She knew the area around Tarlac better than I did, so she helped me narrow down the options. We found a beautiful house about an hour outside the city, 2 bedrooms, a large living area, and most importantly, it sat on half an acre with fruit trees and space for a garden. The asking price was reasonable, well within my budget, and when I saw the photos, I could picture us there. "This is it," she said, looking at the pictures on my laptop. "This is our house. Our house." Those words made everything feel real. The only complication was the legal side. As a foreigner, I couldn't own land in the Philippines. The house would have to be purchased in her name. When the real estate agent explained this, I felt a knot form in my stomach. $40,000 was most of my life savings, everything I'd worked for. Putting it in someone else's name, even someone I loved, felt terrifying. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about all the horror stories I'd heard online about foreigners getting scammed, about relationships that seemed perfect until money changed hands. But then I looked at Jonah Lynn sleeping next to me, peaceful and trusting, and I felt ashamed of my doubts. The next morning, over coffee, I brought up my concerns as gently as I could. "The house being in your name, it makes me nervous," I admitted. "It's not that I don't trust you. It's just a lot of money, and if something happened..." She set down her cup and looked at me with hurt in her eyes. "Do you think I'd ever leave you? Do you think I'm with you for money?" "No, of course not. Everett, I love you. I want to build a life with you. That house isn't mine or yours, it's ours. The paperwork doesn't matter. What matters is what we're building together." She was right. I was overthinking things, letting fear cloud what we had. This was about trust, about taking a leap of faith for love. If I couldn't trust the woman I wanted to spend the rest of my life with, then what was the point of any of it? "You're right," I said, reaching for her hand. "I'm sorry. Let's do it. Let's buy our house." The process took about 3 weeks. Jonah Lynn handled most of the paperwork since it was going in her name, and honestly, I was grateful. The legal system there was confusing to me, and she understood how things worked. I transferred the money from my account to hers, and she took care of the rest. Every few days she'd update me on the progress. "The seller wants to close next week," she'd say, or "We need to sign one more document." I trusted her completely. This was our future we were building. During this time, I also gave her money to help her family. Her father's roof needed repairs after a storm, and her mother was having health problems. It felt good to be able to help, to be the kind of man who could take care of the people his partner loved. In total, I probably gave her another $8,000 for family expenses. It didn't feel like charity, it felt like what you do when you become part of a family. The day we officially got the keys, Jonah Lynn was glowing with happiness. We drove out to the property together, and she ran around the yard like a child, pointing out where we'd plant vegetables, where we'd put the chicken coop, how we'd set up the outdoor seating area. Watching her joy made every dollar feel worth it. "We did it, baby," she said, spinning around in what would be our living room. "We have our house." That first week, we spent every day there, cleaning, arranging furniture, making plans. She'd bring groceries, and we'd cook together in our kitchen. In the evenings, we'd sit on the porch and watch the sun set over the mountains. I felt peaceful for the first time in decades. "I can't believe this is real," I told her one evening as we shared a beer and watched the stars appear. "Believe it," she said, curling up next to me. "This is our life now, just you and me and all this peace." But then something started to change. It was subtle at first. She began mentioning trips back to her family more often. Her mother needed help with something, her sister was having problems, her cousin was getting married. Each trip was supposed to be just for a day or two, but they started stretching longer. "I'll be back tomorrow night," she'd say, kissing me goodbye. Then I wouldn't hear from her until the following afternoon. "Sorry, baby. My mom needed me to stay another day." When I asked if I could come with her to meet her family, she'd get evasive. "Not yet," she'd say. "They're very traditional. I want to prepare them first, explain about us, you understand, right?" I did understand, or at least I told myself I did. Different culture, different expectations. I didn't want to push and make things awkward for her with her family. But the house started feeling lonely when she was gone. I'd sit on that porch by myself, drinking coffee, and wondering when we'd actually start the life we'd planned together. The trips became more frequent, and our communication during them became sporadic. She'd send short text messages, busy with family, talk later, miss you, but when I tried to call, she rarely answered. When she did answer, she always seemed distracted, like she was somewhere noisy or busy. When are we going to actually move in together? I asked her one evening when she returned from another trip. Soon, baby, just be patient. I'm working everything out with my family. They need to understand that I'm serious about this new life. It's been 2 months since we bought the house. I'm living in a hotel room while our home sits empty half the time. I know. Just a little more time. Trust me. Trust. That word was starting to feel heavy. I trusted her with my money, with my dreams, with my future. But trust was getting harder when I felt like I was living in limbo. One morning, after she'd been gone for 4 days with minimal contact, I decided to drive out to the house by myself. I needed to feel connected to our plan, to remind myself why I'd made this leap. When I pulled up to the property, I noticed the gate was locked with a chain I didn't recognize. I'd never seen that chain before. I called Jonalyn immediately. It went to voicemail. I tried again an hour later. Still voicemail. Finally, that evening, she called me back. Hi, baby. Sorry. I was helping my mom all day. What's wrong? I went to the house today, and it was locked with a chain I've never seen. Did you change the lock? There was a pause. Oh yes, my cousin is staying there temporarily just for security. To make sure no one breaks in while we're not there. I should have told you. Your cousin? I don't understand. Why didn't you ask me first? It's just temporary, Everett. Just until we're ready to move in properly. I didn't think you'd mind. But I did mind. It was our house. I'd paid for it. I should have been consulted about who could stay there even temporarily. That night I couldn't sleep. Something felt wrong, but I couldn't put my finger on what it was. Over the next few weeks, the pattern continued. Jonalyn would disappear for days at a time, always with some family emergency or obligation. Our conversations became shorter and less frequent. When I suggested visiting the house together, she always had a reason why it wasn't a good time. My cousin is still there, she'd say, or we need to wait until the weekend, or let me check with my family first. I started feeling like a stranger to the life I'd paid for. Here I was, living in a hotel room, while our house, my investment, our future sat occupied by people I'd never met, managed by a woman who was becoming increasingly distant. Then came the phone call that changed everything. I was having lunch at a small restaurant in Clark when my phone rang. The caller ID showed a local number I didn't recognize. Hello, is this Mr. Everett? The voice asked in accented English. Yes, speaking. Sir, this is Manny from the barangay office near your property. I've been trying to help process the utility connections you requested, but there's a problem. What kind of problem? Sir, the property ownership has changed. The house is no longer registered to Miss Jonalyn. It was sold last week to a new owner. I felt the world tilt. What do you mean sold? That's impossible. Sir, I have the documents here. The deed was transferred to a Mr. Edgar Santos 5 days ago. I'm sorry, but I cannot process utility connections for a property you don't own. My hands started shaking. There has to be a mistake. Can I see these documents? Of course, sir. You can come to the office anytime. I hung up and immediately tried calling Jonalyn. Straight to voicemail. I tried again. Still voicemail. I sent her an urgent text. Call me right now. Emergency. No response. I drove to the barangay office like a madman, my heart pounding so hard I thought I might pass out. Manny was a kind older man who looked genuinely sympathetic as he showed me the paperwork. There it was, in black and white. The property had been sold 5 days ago for $35,000. Jonalyn's signature was on the transfer documents. Mr. Everett, I'm very sorry. This happens sometimes. Did you know about this sale? No, I whispered. I paid for this house. It was supposed to be for both of us. Manny shook his head sadly. I've seen this before, sir. I'm very sorry. I sat in my car outside that office for over an hour, trying to process what had happened. Our house was gone. Sold to a stranger. The woman I loved, the woman I'd trusted with everything, had sold our future and disappeared. $40,000. Gone. Just like that. I tried calling her again and again. Finally, her phone started going directly to a message saying the number was no longer in service. She'd changed her number. Desperate, I drove to the coffee shop where she used to work. The manager told me she'd quit 2 weeks ago without giving notice. No forwarding address, no contact information. She'd just stopped showing up. I went to the small apartment in Clark where she'd been staying before we got together. The landlord said she'd moved out a month ago, paid her final rent in cash, and left. No one knew where she'd gone. For 3 days, I barely ate or slept. I kept thinking there had to be an explanation, some misunderstanding that could be cleared up. Maybe her family had pressured her into selling. Maybe there was some legal complication I didn't understand. Maybe she was in trouble and needed the money quickly. But deep down, I knew the truth. I'd been conned. Expertly, completely conned by someone I'd fallen in love with. Finally, I remembered her mentioning a cousin who worked at a mall in Angeles City. I spent a whole day driving around to different malls, asking employees if they knew Jonalyn. At the 4th mall, I found her a young woman named Liza who worked at a cell phone store. "Oh, you're the American," she said when I introduced myself. "Yeah, Jonalyn talked about you. Do you know where she is? I need to talk to her. Something happened with the house we bought together." Liza looked uncomfortable. "Sir, she moved to Cebu last week. She's with her new boyfriend now." The words hit me like a punch to the stomach. New boyfriend? Yeah, some businessman from Manila. She said she was done with provincial life. She wanted to live in the city, go to nice restaurants, travel. She said she finally found someone who could give her what she wanted. I felt nauseous. Did she mention the house at all? The money? Liza shrugged. She said she had enough money now to live the life she wanted. "Look, sir, I'm sorry, but Jonalyn is my cousin, and I love her, but she's always been ambitious. She wants nice things. She was never going to be happy living quietly in the province." That evening, I managed to find Jonalyn on Facebook Messenger. Her profile picture was her in a fancy dress at some upscale restaurant in Cebu, smiling at the camera with her arm around a man in an expensive-looking suit. I typed out a long message. I deleted it. I typed another one. Deleted that too. Finally, I sent just 4 words. "Why did you do this?" For hours, nothing. Then, at 2 in the morning, I got a reply. I needed more. 3 words. After everything we'd shared, everything I'd given her, everything I'd believed we were building together, 3 words. "I trusted you with everything." I wrote back. "I loved you." I watched the message show as delivered, then seen. Then, nothing. When I woke up the next morning and tried to send another message, I discovered she'd blocked me. Her profile was gone from my view. I spent the next week in a haze of disbelief and self-loathing. I'd check into a cheap motel room and just lie there, staring at the ceiling, trying to understand how I'd been so stupid. $48,000, my entire life savings, my future, my security gone, not stolen exactly, but given away willingly to someone who'd never loved me at all. The worst part wasn't even the money. It was the realization that everything I'd believed about us had been a lie. Every kiss, every conversation about our future, every time she'd said she loved me, all of it had been an act. I'd been so desperate to be loved, so eager to believe someone could want a simple life with me, that I'd ignored every red flag. Looking back, the signs had been there. The way she'd avoided introducing me to her family, how she'd handled all the paperwork for the house without letting me see the documents, her increasing absences and evasiveness, the mysterious cousin staying at our house. I'd seen all of it, but I'd explained it away because I wanted to believe in what we had. I thought about calling the police, but what crime had been committed? I'd willingly put the house in her name. I'd willingly given her money. She'd never forced me to do anything. She'd lied, yes, but lying to someone who loves you isn't illegal, just cruel. On my last day in that motel room, I looked at myself in the mirror and saw a broken old man. My eyes were hollow, my face gaunt from not eating properly. I looked exactly like what I was, a fool who'd gambled everything on love and lost. "Everett," I said to my reflection, "you idiot. You stupid, desperate idiot." But as I stood there, something else began to surface through the pain. Anger, yes, but also a strange kind of clarity. This wasn't just about Jonalyn being a con artist. This was about me being so hungry for love and connection that I'd ignored my own instincts. I'd wanted to be needed so badly that I'd handed over control of my entire future to someone I'd known for just a few months. I'd made this possible, not just by being trusting but by being desperate. Before leaving the Philippines, I decided to visit the house one last time. I needed to see it, to say goodbye to the dream I'd built around it. The new owner, Edgar, was there with a contractor, planning renovations. He was a polite man in his 30s who spoke good English. "You're the American who bought this place originally?" he asked when I introduced myself. "I paid for it, yes, through Jonalyn." He looked sympathetic. "I'm sorry, man. I didn't know the full story when I bought it. The seller said it was a family property that needed to be sold quickly for medical expenses." "How much did you pay for it?" $35,000. She said she needed cash quickly, so I got a good deal. Even in her betrayal, she'd been smart. She'd sold it for less than it was worth to ensure a quick sale, but still made a profit on my investment. I walked through the house one more time, looking at the rooms where I'd imagined us cooking together, sleeping together, growing old together. The fruit trees I'd planned to tend, the space where we were going to plant vegetables, the porch where we were going to watch sunsets. In the kitchen, I found a coffee mug I'd bought, one of the few things we'd picked out together for our future home. Edgar noticed me looking at it. "You can take that if you want," he said kindly. "No," I said. "Leave it. Maybe it'll bring you better luck than it brought me." I walked out of that house and closed the door behind me for the last time. I didn't look back. At the airport, waiting for my flight back to the States, I wrote her one final message on a piece of paper I never sent. "Dear Jonalyn, I hope the life you built with my money makes you happy. I hope the businessman from Manila gives you everything you wanted that I couldn't. I don't hate you, though I probably should. I understand now that you saw an opportunity and you took it. Maybe I would have done the same thing if I were in your position, young, ambitious, stuck in a small town with limited options. Maybe to you I was just a means to an end, and maybe that's fair. I was using you too, in a way, to fill a loneliness I couldn't face on my own. But I hope someday you'll remember that what I felt for you was real, even if what you felt for me wasn't. I hope you'll remember that I would have given you anything you asked for, if you'd just been honest about what you wanted. I hope you'll remember that you broke more than just my bank account, you broke my faith in love itself. Take care of yourself, and I hope you never have to know what it feels like to be on the other side of what you did to me." I never sent it because there was no point. She'd made her choice, and so had I. The difference was, I'd chosen love, and she'd chosen money. Neither of us had been entirely honest, she about her intentions, me about my desperation. The flight home was the longest 18 hours of my life. I had about $2,000 left to my name, no house, no plan, and no idea how to rebuild at 61 years old. I'd have to start over again, but this time with the additional burden of knowing how easily I could be deceived when I wanted to believe in something badly enough. But somewhere over the Pacific Ocean, looking down at the vast darkness of the water below, I realized something important. I was still alive. Broken, humiliated, nearly broke, but alive. And maybe that was enough to work with. Maybe this was just the cost of trying to love again after so many years of loneliness. Maybe the real mistake hadn't been trusting her, but trusting her with everything all at once. When I landed in Los Angeles for my connecting flight, I called my brother in Toledo. "Jimmy, it's Everett. I'm coming home. Everything okay, man? How's the paradise life?" "It wasn't paradise. Can I stay with you for a while? I need to figure some things out." "Of course. What happened?" "I'll tell you when I see you. I made some mistakes. Big ones. We all do, brother. Come home." Home. The word felt foreign after everything that had happened, but also strangely comforting. Maybe home wasn't a house in the Philippines with fruit trees and mountain views. Maybe home was just wherever you were willing to start over, to try again, to pick up the pieces and keep going. I never heard from Jonalyn again. Sometimes I wonder if she thinks about me, about the house we were supposed to share, about the life we planned that was never real to begin with. I wonder if she feels any guilt, or if she's justified it all as necessary for her survival and happiness. I wonder if her businessman from Manila made her happy, or if she moved on to someone else when he stopped being useful to her. Mostly, though, I try not to wonder. Some questions don't have answers, and some betrayals don't have explanations that would make them hurt less. What I know for certain is this: I loved her, and that love was real, even if hers wasn't. And maybe that's enough. Maybe the capacity to love, even foolishly, even dangerously, is worth more than the safety of never risking your heart at all. I'm back in Ohio now, living with my brother, working part-time at a friend's garage while I figure out what comes next. I'm older, poorer, and wiser in ways I wish I didn't have to be. But I'm still here, still capable of sunrise, coffee, and conversations with strangers, still able to imagine a future even if it looks nothing like the one I'd planned. And if someone asks me about love, about trust, about taking chances on people who might break your heart, I'll tell them this: be careful, but don't be so careful that you stop living. The woman who took everything from me also gave me something valuable, even if she didn't mean to. She showed me I was still capable of loving completely, of hoping deeply, of building dreams worth believing in. She couldn't take that away from me, no matter how much money she stole. That's the thing about betrayal: it can break your bank account and shatter your plans, but it can't erase the fact that you were brave enough to love in the first place. And maybe, in the end, that bravery is worth more than any house, any savings account, any promise someone makes to you under a sunset that was never quite as perfect as it seemed.